Hola, bienvenido o bienvenida a esta clase. Hello and welcome to today's class. Here's our 50 questions and answers that you need to know in Spanish. I'm going to try to not explain too much because I do love explaining Spanish, but I'm going to try to quickly give you the 50 best questions and answers in Spanish. So, número uno, ¿cómo estás? How are you? Estoy bien. Gracias. ¿Y tú? Okay? Remember that tú is informal and usted, look at me, I'm already explaining. Usted is formal, okay? Tú, informal, usted, formal. So, estoy bien, gracias, y usted or y tú, okay? Número dos, ¿qué haces? What are you doing? Estoy trabajando. I am working. Now, it's interesting because here we're saying ¿qué haces? Notice how I don't say ¿qué estás haciendo? Which would mean what are you doing? In Spanish, we can use the regular present simple tense to talk about things that are happening now or in the near future. So sometimes something like haces can mean the ing in English. So in this case, doing. What are you doing, right? In that case. So estoy trabajando, right? There's another ing. I am working. Okay? ¿Dónde vives? Vivo en Ciudad de México. Where do you live? I live in Mexico. Now you might be concerned, Nate, I see accents everywhere. Why do we use them? And what's going on here? In this case, the actual pronunciation of donde does not change because there's an accent on it. In this case, the only reason that we're putting the accent on the word donde is because we're asking a question. So if I were to reply and say something like donde vivo, blah blah blah, where I live, whatever, then I don't need to put the accent over the o in this case. So it would just be donde with no accent. Okay, but because we're asking a question, we'll put the accent on there. Okay. Número cuatro, ¿a qué te dedicas? Soy maestro or maestra. So literally, what do you dedicate yourself to? This is a reflexive verb. Okay. What do you dedicate yourself to? Oh, I'm a teacher. You could say me dedico a, and whatever. Me dedico a dar clases de español. I give Spanish classes. Or you can just say something like soy and then whatever your job is. Okay? ¿Qué hora es? Son las 3:30. What time is it? It's 3:30. When talking about the time, we use the word hora, literally meaning hour. So, what is the hour? And when I respond to you, I will use the verb ser in the present tense, and I will say something like son. The reason I use son is because here, las tres is plural. However, if I was saying it's 1, let's say it's 1 in the afternoon, I would say to you, es la una. So notice how now we're using es instead of son. This is the only time when we're going to use es. Okay? All the other ones we're going to use son. Número 6. ¿Tienes hambre? Sí. Muchísima. Are you hungry? Yes. Very. Muchísima is basically just saying that we are very hungry. Notice how that in Spanish, I don't say estás hambre, I say tienes hambre. Do you have hunger? So in this case, I could just say sí, muchísima, or I could just say sí, tengo hambre, or tengo mucha hambre. Okay? Hambre is feminine. Okay? ¿Quieres agua? Sí, por favor. Yes, I do. Please. Something that we could also add to this is something like this. Just like with hunger, same thing with thirst. Tengo sed. Sed is thirst. So I am thirsty. Número 8. ¿Te gusta tu trabajo? Sí, me encanta. Do you like your job? Yes, I love it. Now notice, in the word tú without an accent over the u right there means your. If tú were to have an accent here, it would mean you. Now, how do you know the difference between tú and tú if they're pronounced exactly the same? Context clues. So in writing, I can see the accent, but when I'm having a real conversation, I'm not going to see the accent, obviously. So the way I understand if the person is saying you or your is simply based off of context clues. It wouldn't make sense to say, do you like you job, right? It makes sense to say your job, okay? Also, for me encanta, me is what we call an indirect object pronoun, and in this case, trabajo, which is a noun, is performing the action of enchanting, or in this case, loving. Okay, so it enchants me. So therefore, it's encanta instead of encantó because you're not performing the action of enchanting. El trabajo is performing that action. Okay? Número 9. ¿Qué estudias? Estudio español. What do you study? I study Spanish. Pretty self-explanatory. ¿Dónde estás? Estoy en casa. Notice how we're saying en casa instead of saying a casa. This is because if I say a casa, it sounds like I'm performing that action to the house, when in reality, I just happen to be in the house, but I'm not performing the action of being in the house to the house. Sounds odd, but just use en instead of a. Número 11. ¿Con quién vas? Voy con mis amigos. Who are you going with? Same thing here with our accent on the E here, okay, or e in Spanish. Because I'm asking a question, I will put the accent. If I were making a statement, then there would, I don't need to put an accent there. So, ¿con quién vas? Who are you going with? Voy con mis amigos. I'm going with my friends. Once again, notice how voy is in the regular present tense, which can mean I go or I am going, depending on the context. So in this case, it makes more sense to say I am going. Okay? ¿Qué quieres comer? Quiero tacos. What do you want to eat? I want tacos. Or I could just say quiero comer tacos. Okay? ¿Qué quieres comer? ¿Qué pasó? Nada. Todo bien. What happened? Nothing. All good. Todo bien. Okay? Pretty easy there. Pasar means to happen. Okay? ¿Qué pasó? What happened? Can also mean to pass. ¿Qué tal tu día? How's your day going? Muy bien. Gracias. So, very good. Thank you. Okay? Quick explanation here. Bien is what we call an adverb, whereas bueno is an adjective. So, I could say to you, hablas bien español. You speak Spanish well. Bien is modifying the verb of hablas. Remember that hablas is just an action word, whereas bueno is going to be an adjective, so it describes a noun, something like hombre or chico. So, él es un buen chico or un chico bueno, for example. Okay, that's the difference there. Adverb versus adjective. Okay, ¿a qué hora sales? What time do you get off? Salgo a las 6. I get off at 6. Sales in this case could also mean what time you leave. Okay, ¿a qué hora sales? So at what time do you leave? ¿Quieres ir? Sí. Vamos. Do you want to go? Yes. Let's go. Now, in Spanish, if I were to just say ¿Quieres ir a la playa siempre? For example, that's a statement. You always want to go to the beach. So, ¿Quieres ir could mean you want to go or do you want to go if I'm asking you a question. Okay? ¿Cuándo llegas? Llego en 10 minutos. I arrive in 10 minutes. Once again, with cuando, the accent over this a right here is being used because we're asking a question. However, the pronunciation with or without the accent does not change. Okay? ¿Dónde naciste? Nací en California. Where were you born? I was born in California. This is what we call the preterite tense, which is a one-time action in the past. The verb nacer is preterite by nature because you can only be born one time. So, ¿Dónde naciste? Yo nací en California. I was born, okay? I wasn't being born. I wasn't used to being born. I was born one time in the past. Okay? ¿Cuánto cuesta? Very important one to know. How much does it cost? Or how much is it? Cuesta 200 pesos. It costs 200 pesos. Or it is 200 pesos. Okay? Número 20. ¿Qué música te gusta? Or ¿qué tipo de música te gusta? Me gusta el rock. Okay? What music do you like? I like rock. Something to note here is that when a word in Spanish starts with a singular R, then we're going to roll it. So, like in the word rojo, for example, or maybe in the word rosa, for example, okay? Rojo or rosa, okay? Obviously, it doesn't need to be that exaggerated, but when you have a singular R at the start of a word in Spanish, it's going to be rolled. I have videos inside my Fluent Spanish Speaker Academy on exactly how to roll your R's quickly, okay? Número 21. ¿Tienes hermanos? Sí, tengo dos. Hermanos could mean brothers or it can mean siblings. If I were to change this to hermanas, then that would just mean sisters, because hermanas can only represent females, whereas hermanos can represent both females and males, okay, or just males. So, ¿tienes hermanos? Do you have siblings? Sí, tengo dos. ¿Qué compraste? Compré comida. What did you buy? Food. And remember, this is the preterite tense. So what did you buy? You weren't buying. You didn't used to buy. You bought. Or in this case, what did you buy? Compré comida. I bought. I wasn't buying. I didn't used to buy. I bought. Okay? ¿Cómo te llamas? What's your name? Me llamo Nate. My name is Nate. Now, this is interesting. This is actually what we call a reflexive verb. The infinitive form of this would be llamarse. Se makes it reflexive, meaning that we do this to ourselves. So literally, when you ask someone, ¿Cómo te llamas?, you are literally saying to them, how do you call yourself? And you would respond with, I call myself Nate. Or in English, we would just say, what's your name? My name is Nate. Pretty interesting. Número 24. ¿Qué quieres hacer hoy? What do you want to do today? Quiero descansar. I want to rest. Okay? ¿Te duele algo? Sí, la cabeza. Now, the verb doler is interesting because you don't perform the verb doler to yourself. It happens to you. And the verb doler behaves like a verb like gustar or encantar. These are things that happen to us. We don't necessarily perform them to ourselves. So if something is hurting you or aching you, we're not going to say, me duelo, for example, I hurt myself. What I'm trying to say is that something is hurting me. So if I were to say to you, ¿te duele algo?, I could say, sí, me duele la cabeza. In this case, duele is being conjugated in the third person singular, which is the él, ella, or usted form. And the reason we do that is because we're talking about la cabeza. So in this case, la cabeza is performing the action of duele. And who's it affecting? You. Okay, so ¿te duele la cabeza? Okay, sí, me duele la cabeza. Okay, and if you work in a health profession, this is a very important thing to know and understand. And if you just want to use a regular noun, dolor is the noun meaning pain. Okay? ¿A dónde vas? Voy al trabajo. So where are you going? I'm going to work. Al is simply the combination of a and el put together. That's why we would say something like del taco. Del taco is the combination of de and el. We don't want to say de él. We can just shorten it and say del. Or instead of saying a él, al. For something like a la, it's just going to be a la. So for the feminine, it will be the same. Okay? So voy al trabajo. Now, why do we need to use él in this case? Why can't I just say voy a trabajo? Because it sounds like you're saying, I go, I work. Trabajo can also be a verb, right? Yo trabajo, I work. When I add the article, which is el, it lets us know that this is a noun and not a verb. So I am going to work. Okay? Muy bien. Número 27. ¿Puedes ayudarme? Sí, claro. Can you help me? Yes, of course. This is an object pronoun. In this case, it's a direct object pronoun. And you can actually attach it at the end of an infinitive verb, which in this case, ayudar is an infinitive. Remember that infinitive verbs are verbs that have not been conjugated yet. So a verb that ends in either AR, ER, or IR. Something like ayudar, or comer, or vivir. Those are all infinitives. Now, I could attach it onto the end here, or I could put it at the beginning or in front of our first conjugated verb, which in this case is puedes, which has been conjugated from the infinitive form poder. So if I say me puedes ayudar, I wouldn't say me puedes ayudarme. I would just say me puedes ayudar. Now, is there a difference between me puedes ayudar and puedes ayudarme? No, they're both the same, and it simply comes down to your personal preference. Okay? Bien. Número 28. ¿Qué estás viendo? What are you watching? Una serie, a show, or a series. Now, many students will ask, well, Nate, should I use viendo or mirando? In Latin America, it's very common that we'll use the verb ver when talking about watching TV. Mira or mirar is much more intentional. If I'm telling you, mira, mira, look, look, that's a command. Whereas ver is slightly more passive, okay? So, ver versus mirar. Use ver when talking about watching something like TV or a movie, okay? ¿Dónde compraste eso? Lo compré en el mercado. Where did you buy that? I bought it in the market. Eso is the neuter, and it means that. It is not masculine. Ese would be the masculine here, and esa would be the feminine. So, if I were to use ese or esa, then I would need to mention the noun afterwards. So, for example, ¿Dónde compraste ese refrigerador? Where did you buy that refrigerator? Refrigerator is masculine. Or, ¿Dónde compraste esa botella? Where did you buy that bottle? It's feminine. But if I don't mention anything, if I don't mention a noun, then eso can be used. Either because I don't know what I'm talking about, I don't know the gender of what I'm talking about, or because it's just a standalone sentence. Eso can be standalone, whereas something like ese or esa is typically used in combination with a noun. Okay? So, ¿dónde compraste eso? And then, lo compré en el mercado. Lo meaning it. Okay? I bought it at the market. Okay? ¿Te gusta cocinar? Sí, bastante. Yes, a lot. Bastante can be good or bad. Just means a lot of something. Once again, with an idea of te gusta, for example, the verb of gustar. In this case, the verb cocinar is the thing that is pleasing me. When it comes to an infinitive verb, we're going to use gusta, the third person singular. So, ¿te gusta cocinar? Sí, me gusta cocinar. Okay? All right? ¿Qué tomaste? Tomé café. What did you drink? I drank coffee. If you would like to say a coffee shop or a cafe, in Spanish you can say cafeteria. Okay? Café will be for coffee, cafeteria for coffee shop. Okay? ¿Qué dijiste? Dije que sí. What did you say? I said yes. Okay? ¿Qué te pasa? Estoy cansado. What's wrong? I'm tired. ¿Qué te pasa can also sound like what is wrong with you, and it can sound rude depending on what you're trying to say. If you think someone is sick or something is wrong with someone, you could also say something like ¿Qué tienes? Literally, what do you have? But it just means, hey, are you okay? What's wrong? Is everything okay? Do you feel bad? ¿Qué tienes? Are you sick? Are you sad? What's going on? Okay, so both work. And then we're going to use estoy instead of soy. Remember that estoy is for talking about things that are not permanent, like feeling tired. I'm not going to feel tired forever. An example that I like to give is the example with the word aburrido. So if I were to say soy aburrido versus estoy aburrido, I apologize for my bad handwriting. Soy aburrido means I am a boring person, whereas estoy aburrido means I am bored. It's temporary. It's not going to last forever. Okay? ¿Cuándo es tu cumpleaños? Es el 12 de mayo. When is your birthday? It's May 12th. So notice how we have the number, then we have de, which is a preposition, it's a connector word, and then the month, mayo. In Spanish, you're actually never going to capitalize the months. So mayo will never be capitalized. Enero, febrero, agosto, all of that, never capitalized. Always lowercase. ¿Te gusta viajar? Sí, muchísimo. Do you like to travel? Yes, very much. You could say, sí, me gusta viajar, or me gusta mucho viajar. Okay? ¿Qué hiciste ayer? Fui al cine. What did you do yesterday? I went to the movies. If you were to say something like iba, for example, that wouldn't necessarily be correct in this example. But fui versus iba, so fui, I went, whereas iba meaning I used to go, or I was going, or I would go. The imperfect tense can be tricky for students because the translations into English can vary. That's why in Spanish, context is very, very important. Okay, ¿quieres café? Sí, con leche. Yes, with coffee. I love coffee. Recently, I haven't been drinking it, and I kind of miss it. Let me know in the comments if you enjoy drinking coffee, because a mí me encanta el café, la verdad. Okay? ¿Dónde trabajas? Trabajo en una escuela. Where do you work? I work in a school. Or you think of this as at a school. But once again, notice how we're using the preposition en instead of a. Because you don't work at the school or to the school. You don't work literally on the school. You work at the school or in the school, which is why we use en instead of a. Okay? ¿Tienes tiempo? Sí, un poco. So we can also use the word tiempo to talk about time. Tiempo can also refer to the weather. So hace buen tiempo. It's good weather today. You can also use the word clima for weather. Okay? ¿Qué opinas? Creo que está bien. What do you think? I think it's good. So let's say I'm saying, hey, what if we go out to this restaurant? ¿Qué opinas? I can say, ¿qué opinas? You could say something like, ¿qué piensas? But typically, ¿qué piensas is like, what are you thinking about? ¿Qué opinas is better, meaning literally, what do you opinion? Or what do you think? What's your take? What are your thoughts? So, ¿qué opinas? What do you think if we go to this restaurant? You can say, ¿qué piensas? It makes sense, but it's better to say something like, ¿qué opinas? If I said to you, ¿qué piensas? It sounds like I'm saying, what are you thinking about? Okay? ¿Puedes repetir? Sí, claro. Can you repeat? Yes, of course. You could also say something like, ¿puedes repetir eso? Okay? Could you repeat that? Okay? Both work. ¿Tienes sueño? Sí, mucho. Are you sleepy? Yes, very. Okay? Notice how once again with tienes, it's do you have instead of are you. So you wouldn't say estás sueño. You say tienes sueño. And un sueño can also be a noun, meaning dream. Un sueño. Okay? There's a funny song. It's Sueño, un sueño yo viví. Good song. Check it out. Okay. Almost done. ¿Vienes mañana? Sí, ahí estaré. So, are you coming tomorrow? Notice how vienes is the present simple, okay? It could mean you come, but in this case, because it will happen in the near future, we can say just vienes, which is are you coming when we're asking a question. Estaré is what we call the simple future. In this case, it will mean I will be there. Most times in Latin America, we will use what's called the informal future, which is this little formula. And if you haven't learned it, it's very easy to learn. I highly recommend you learn about it. Ir plus a plus infinitive. So you could say, ¿vienes mañana? And respond, sí, voy a venir mañana. Yes, I'm going to come tomorrow. Okay? So both work there. Almost done. ¿Qué buscas? Busco mis llaves. What are you looking for? Once again, using the present simple there, but it's acting like an ing verb in English. Busco mis llaves. Okay? ¿Quieres salir? Sí. ¿A dónde vamos? Oops, here I accidentally I separated it. Boop. Just like new, like it never even happened. So, yes, where are we going? Do you want to go out? Yes. Where are we going? Okay? ¿A qué hora te despiertas? Me despierto a las 7. Despertarse is a reflexive verb because you perform the action of waking up to yourself. No one is waking you up in this case. You are doing that to yourself, and therefore it's reflexive, just meaning that we do it to ourselves. That's why when I respond, I wouldn't just say despierto. I would need to add on the me to let us know I wake myself up. Because if I didn't put me here and I just said despierto, it sounds like I am performing the action of waking up to someone or something else. So I need to say me despierto a las 7. Okay? ¿Qué tal el clima? Hace calor. Okay, so how's the weather? Like I said, clima can be used for weather. Hace calor. It is hot. So we wouldn't say es caliente. We would say hace. We're going to use that verb hace, meaning to do or to make. But in this case, with weather, it will just mean it is. So hace calor or hace frío. It's cold. Okay? ¿Qué planes tienes? Tengo una reunión. What plans do you have? I have a meeting. Reunión meaning meeting. Or you could use the more informal word of junta. Una junta. ¿Cuándo empiezas? Empiezo mañana. When do you start? I start tomorrow. ¿Dónde aprendiste español? Lo aprendí solo, en línea, or viajando. So where'd you learn Spanish? I learned by myself, or online, or traveling. Now notice how almost all of these common questions have basic who, what, when, where, and why in them. That's really important. So think about in English, if you meet someone new and you're going to ask them questions, oh, what should we talk about? I don't know. Just think, right? Who, what, when, where, why, or how. You do the same thing in Spanish. So, qué, cuándo, quién, dónde, cómo, for example. Okay? Bueno, muchas gracias por ver este video. I know this is a lot of information. I hope you've learned something new. If you'd like to learn more Spanish than me, click the link in the video description to check out our Fluent Spanish Speaker Academy. Our goal is to help you have a 10-minute conversation in Spanish in 90 days without feeling unconfident. So you can check it out by clicking the link in the video description. Muchas gracias. Hasta luego.